Respect never disappears, it just moves to where it's valued. There's something strange that many people only realize after they've grown tired in a relationship. The more you try to hold on to closeness, the more the other person pulls away. The more you show love, sincerity, or simply your presence, the more they seem to dismiss it. And it's not because you're not good enough. It's because in their eyes, the emotions you offer come too easily, and things that come easily are rarely appreciated. Maybe you've been there in that space where you gave so much, waited so long, and hoped that if you were just patient enough, things would change. But the only thing that truly changed was how they treated you, with less care, less respect, and at times, a cold indifference that felt almost cruel. And you started to wonder, did I do something wrong? Or did I simply let my emotions go too far? Then one day, something inside you shifts. You stop reacting. You stop explaining. You stop chasing. Not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about yourself. You pulled back not out of spite, but out of clarity. You choose silence. You create space. You return to a place where your peace matters more than their attention. And in that moment, everything begins to shift. In the absence of emotion, there's a quiet weight they never noticed before. The person who once took you for granted now becomes uncertain. They're no longer sure you still need them. And your silence doesn't make you weak, it makes you harder to read, harder to replace, and suddenly worth rethinking. This video is a journey into the often misunderstood psychology of relationships, why people only start respecting you when you stop over-expressing how you feel, why calm presence has more power than any explanation, and why, sometimes, taking a step back is the only way to rise in someone's perception. Don't click away just yet, because once you understand what really happens when you stop chasing respect, you'll never feel the need to fight for it again. You'll simply step back and let your stillness do the rest. And if you're looking for insights like this ones that go beyond surface advice and speak to both your mind and your inner clarity, then don't forget to subscribe. This channel is here to help you understand yourself more deeply and to show you how people truly operate in silence, in distance, and in all the things left unsaid. Stay with us until the end, because sometimes all it takes is the right perspective to never have to fight for your worth again. You don't lose people's respect just because you love too much. You lose it when your emotions become predictable and easy to exploit. In every relationship, whether it's romantic, familial, or professional, there's an unspoken rule that always runs beneath the surface. The one who controls their emotions holds the power. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't need threats. If you can stay calm, you instantly become someone they tread carefully around. But the moment you start reacting too quickly, too intensely, or too often, you unknowingly hand over your power. At first, they might find it endearing, the way you're sensitive, the way you worry when things feel off, the way you need reassurance just to feel you're not being left behind. But over time, those same reactions begin to signal something else, that you've lost control over your own inner world. And once they sense that, they no longer see you as an equal, they start seeing you as someone easily controlled. No one says it out loud. They won't look you in the eye and tell you, I respect you less because you're too emotional. Instead, they test your limits subtly. They show up late without saying anything. They respond less often. They speak in vague terms that leave you confused. Then they watch. They observe how you react. And if you get upset, anxious, or start demanding clarity, they know they've taken the reins. Losing power doesn't happen all at once. It erodes slowly every time you trade your calm for a moment of clarity, every time you give up your peace to hold on to someone who's already drifting away. And eventually, you realize you're no longer yourself. You've become a version of you that's fearful, fragile, and emotionally dependent. The hardest part is this: the other person doesn't even have to do anything cruel to hurt you. All they need is a little silence, a little distance, and you unravel on your own. And when they see that, they stop respecting you. Because deep down, people don't respect those who are ruled by emotion. They respect those who can rule themselves. If you've ever found yourself overreacting to a silence or spiraling from a half-written message, you're not alone. But the important thing is, you don't have to keep living this way. You don't have to be a prisoner of what others do or don't do. Real power doesn't come from what you say. It comes from knowing when to stay silent and when to walk away. Most people think silence means weakness, that if you're not speaking up, you must be losing. But in reality, the strongest ones are the ones who know when to say nothing, not because they have nothing to say, but because they refuse to waste their energy on what doesn't deserve it. You've likely felt it yourself, the urge to explain, to be understood, to make things right so the other person sees how much you're hurting, how much you deserve better. But the more you explain, the more you find yourself pushed away. And the more you chase with words, the more they retreat into silence. The problem isn't your choice of words. It's the fact that you're giving away your emotional accessibility without even realizing it. When you always respond, when you're always available, always ready to explain, clarify, or even beg for a bit of kindness, you're unconsciously sending one message: I fear losing this connection more than you do. And humans, wired to crave what's scarce, often take for granted whatever is always there, always willing, always seeking approval. But when you stop, when you don't send another follow-up message, when you don't rush to fill the silence with explanations or questions, when you simply stay quiet in that very moment, you stop being the one chasing. You become a mirror, one they suddenly have to look into. Silence is not the absence of presence. It's a presence with gravity. It doesn't make noise, but it forces others to listen not with their ears, but with their awareness. When silence comes from someone who once cared deeply, spoke often, and showed up fully, it becomes more devastating than any criticism. Because now they don't know what you're thinking, how you're feeling, or what you'll do next. And it's that uncertainty that shifts the way they see you. Respect doesn't come from how much you say. It comes from having the strength to say nothing, especially when anyone else would have spoken. You don't reclaim your place by raising your voice. You do it by holding your silence and making others confront the emptiness you used to fill. And when that emptiness starts to weigh on them, that's when they realize you're no longer the easy, predictable version of yourself they once knew. There's a near paradox in every relationship. The deeper you go emotionally, the easier it is to lose your balance. And once you lose that balance, you lose your sense of self. You start orbiting around them, living in their moods, depending on their reactions to define your worth. No one consciously chooses to become dependent, but it begins subtly, like a soft touch you didn't notice. You just wanted them to reply. You wanted them to know you were hurt. You wanted to understand their silence. These all seem small, even reasonable. But the moment you become too invested in every one of their responses, you've already stepped away from your inner center. And the saddest part is, the moment you step away from your own center, they also step out of your orbit. They stop revolving around you. They become the sun and you, just a planet trying to stay close enough, bright enough, warm enough, hoping they won't leave. But real relationships, the ones that last, are built on balance. And that balance can't come from one-sided holding on. It only comes when you can stand firmly in your own space, unshaken by someone else's emotional weather. And to do that, you must learn to pull back, not to disappear, but to withdraw the excess emotion that's been clouding your direction. When you stop reacting to silences that used to make you anxious, when you no longer overanalyze a vague comment or a cold glance, when you stop asking yourself why they changed, why they grew distant, why they're no longer the same, that's when you begin to return to your center. And from that center, you can observe instead of chase, discern instead of react, and choose instead of being pulled. And the strange thing is, when you return to your center, the other person begins to feel it. They no longer sense that you need them the way you used to. They're not sure if you're still waiting or if you've already moved on. They don't know whether your silence means you're hurt or healed. And it's that uncertainty that makes them look back, not because you said something, but because you stopped saying anything at all. You don't need to chase anyone to get them to stay. Just stand still in your clarity, in your composure, and whatever is truly meant to be in your life will find its way back. And when they realize you've stepped out of emotional dependency, they don't just see you differently. They start respecting you as if it's the first time they're really seeing who you are. When someone hurts you, disrespects you, or tries to diminish you, your first instinct is often to fight back. You want to prove they were wrong. You want your anger to speak for your wounded pride. You want them to know you're not someone they can just walk over. But here's the truth. Lashing out doesn't make you more powerful, it only makes you easier to read. A person who explodes is a person who has been provoked. A person who yells is someone who's lost control. And the more you lose control, the less value you hold in the eyes of someone who was trying to push you there. On the other hand, composure held firmly in the face of insult, chaos, and provocation leaves people unsure of their next move. Because they can't read you. They don't know if you still care, if you're planning something, or if you've simply outgrown their ability to affect you. Composure isn't passive silence. It's not bottling up rage or denying how you feel. It's a deliberate choice to protect your peace. It's a quiet declaration that you will not be dragged down from the position you built with self-awareness and inner discipline. When you don't react, they're forced to face the void where your explosion was expected, and that void unsettles them. It's like touching a wall, expecting it to shake, but it stands firm, still, and unbothered. That's when they realize they no longer know how to shake you because their pressure no longer holds weight. Someone who doesn't react isn't weak, they've simply stopped playing the game. They know their worth is far greater than any argument. And when they choose calm over conflict, the other person feels the shift in control. When you can hold your face still, your voice steady, and your heart undisturbed even while facing injustice, you rise to a new level in the relationship. You're no longer the one trying to be understood. You become the one who must be respected because now they're the ones unsure, cautious, and suddenly aware they can no longer manipulate the dynamic. When you start pulling back emotionally, people often think you're giving up, walking away, or admitting defeat. But what they don't realize is the truth is often the opposite. You're not retreating. You're rising to a higher ground where you're no longer pulled into chaos created by others. You're still there, still present, still feeling everything, but you're no longer playing the emotional tug of war. You choose to observe instead of react, to listen instead of argue, to stay silent instead of yelling for attention. That's not avoidance, that's discipline. And it's a discipline only those who've been deeply hurt truly understand. Detaching emotionally doesn't mean you shut down or pretend not to care. It means you intentionally create distance between what you feel and how you respond. You become deeply aware of your inner worth. And because of that, you no longer need to showcase your emotions like a performance begging for validation. You preserve the most important thing, your self-control. And because of that, you begin to stand taller. Not in arrogance, not in coldness, but because you've stopped moving to someone else's rhythm. You no longer chase their moods, depend on their attention, or allow their actions to dictate how you feel every day. And here's the strange part, when you rise to that level, people are forced to look up to see you. They're no longer speaking to someone who's waiting, pleading, or trying to prove their worth. They're speaking to someone who has chosen peace even at the cost of closeness. And that's when they realize you're not someone everyone gets to reach. The less you're controlled by emotion, the more elusive you become. The more unpredictable, the more magnetic you feel, but not because of charm or appearance. It's the invisible gravity that radiates from your inner stability. People start rethinking how they treat you, not because you demand it, but because they realize that if they don't handle it right, they'll lose you and never get another chance. You don't need to speak to prove your strength. You just need to hold your ground in silence, in stability, and in a space that no one can enter unless you allow it. Because the truth is, it's not your words but your silence that speaks the loudest. In a tense relationship, people often fall into a familiar pattern: a hurtful comment followed by a protest, a cold gesture followed by a complaint, a moment of indifference followed by an emotional explanation. It all becomes a repetitive cycle, like a chess match where both players already know each other's moves. And then, when you suddenly stop, no reaction, no explanation, no pushback, they lose their footing. Your silence becomes an unfamiliar void. There's nothing to argue with, no one to blame, nothing left to prove right or wrong. And in that emptiness, they're forced to face the only thing still standing, themselves. This effect runs deeper than you think. Because when you're still reacting, even in anger or pain, you're still participating. You're still sharing some level of responsibility. You give them something to push against, to critique, to point to as the problem. But when you go completely quiet, you leave nothing behind for them to latch onto, no words, no glances, no anger, and suddenly they begin to hear the only voice left, the one inside themselves. Someone who hurt you won't feel guilty if you're still trying, still explaining, still holding the connection together. But they will feel uneasy when you withdraw without bitterness, because they'll know you don't need anything from them anymore. And that's what unsettles them. Not because you condemn them, but because you no longer needed to. Silence, when held with purpose, is not a weapon to manipulate, it's a mirror. And not everyone has the courage to look into a mirror, especially when it reflects what they've tried to avoid. True respect doesn't come from making someone fear your absence with threats. It comes from the moment you no longer try to stay and they're left wondering, why did someone who once cared so deeply suddenly walk away needing nothing from me at all? That question lingers in their mind, and sometimes that one unanswered question is what causes them to see you in an entirely new light. There's a subtle shift that happens when you start choosing your peace over being understood. It's the moment you let go of your need to be validated, empathized with, or treated right, not because you've given up, but because you've realized that no respect worth having is built on the need to prove your worth. You used to believe that if you were kind enough, clear enough, sincere enough, people would eventually see your true value. And when they didn't, you tried harder, explaining, fixing, holding on by any means necessary. But the further you walked down that path, the more lost you felt. Because your inner peace had been replaced by something invisible, the fear of being misunderstood. The truth is, people only understand you when they want to understand you. And they only want to understand when they realize you're no longer within their control. That doesn't come from what you say or how emotional you are, it comes from the energy you carry. When you stop living to please others and start quietly protecting your own peace, people start sensing something different about you. Not because you're angry, not because you turned your back, but because you no longer need them to define who you are. And that, more than anything, is what makes people begin to respect you. People don't respect you because you're nice, or because you're forgiving, or because you're endlessly patient. They only truly respect you when they know you'll walk away the moment your peace is threatened. You don't have to say it, you just have to live like it's self-evident. You begin to pull back the energy you once poured into making everything make sense. You stop caring whether they misunderstand you, accept you, or offer you a place in their life. Because you've already found that place within yourself, in the quiet space you built with self-respect and unwavering clarity. And when people see that you no longer need them to feel whole, they're forced to re-examine how they're showing up in your life. They're no longer speaking to someone fragile or predictable. They're facing someone who has chosen peace over recognition. And that, even if they never say it aloud, makes them take a step back, not because you demanded it, but because they no longer dare to cross certain lines. There's a kind of presence that needs no introduction, a strength that doesn't announce itself, a form of self-respect that's not loud or flashy but always makes others think twice about how they treat you. You don't need to say, "I deserve respect." They'll feel it not from your words, but from how you enter a space, stay composed, and refuse to let anything disturb your inner state. You may have once worked so hard just to be seen, to have someone recognize your worth. But eventually you realize something powerful. True value isn't something you convince others of. It's something they feel when they're around you. If the energy you carry is anxious, needy, or fearful of abandonment, then no matter how hard you try, They'll always feel like the one in control. But when your presence is steady, calm, and no longer hungry for validation, that presence alone creates a boundary no one can cross without awareness. That's not arrogance. That's a grounded strength, the kind that makes others pause before entering your space, choose their words more carefully, and rethink any careless behavior. True self-respect doesn't need an audience. It doesn't depend on compliments, and it doesn't disappear when you're misunderstood. It's something you build from within every time you choose peace over arguments, silence over justifications, and self-control over reaction. When you walk into a room without seeking attention, without needing to be heard, without trying to win anyone over, that's when your energy speaks the loudest. It says, I didn't come here to be accepted. I came here as I am. And that presence, even if never spoken out loud, always causes others to adjust their behavior. Because real respect is never asked for, and it can't be demanded. It's something people can't help but give you when they sense that you will stand your ground, whether they recognize your value or not. In the end, every relationship reveals its true nature when you stop. When you no longer strive to be understood. When you no longer react just to keep the closeness alive. When you no longer chase to prove your worth. The moment you quietly pull back all the energy you once poured into pleasing, explaining, or fixing is the moment you return something to yourself that you may have forgotten. The right to peace. The one who once dismissed you will feel the emptiness. The one who once manipulated your emotions will feel disoriented. And the one who thought you'd always be there will be forced to face something they never expected. You never needed them to feel complete. This isn't punishment. It's not a power play. It's simply the natural action of someone who's returned to their rightful place, a place where you no longer live to be accepted, but to protect your dignity and preserve your inner stability. You don't need to abandon everything to prove you're strong. You just need to stay silent when it matters, step back when it's time, and keep your heart from being pulled into external chaos. Because only when you stop being led by emotion can you truly lead the game. And it is in that very moment when you no longer crave validation, no longer wait for a response, no longer need to be understood, that others are left with no choice but to respect you. Because in a world of noise and knee-jerk reactions, the one who can remain calm is always the one who makes others stop and think.